Now, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Even in the back? Okay. Well, I want to say I am so happy to be here in this new library. And it's just so great. My only reservation is that giving this talk kind of blows my cover, because I sneak in the library. I'm this mousy lady, and I have this place located at the very back, the last carrel, and I come in there and I write, and nobody ever notices me. So who knows what's going to happen next. As you know, memoirs are getting more and more popular. I read one headline that said that publishers are buying them by the truckload. Now, I think that's a bit of exaggeration, but they are very popular, and there are several reasons. One of it is that we have so many literate people. Never in the history of the human race have we had so many people who could read and write, and then with the internet, they, of course, have an audience, and so everyone is emboldened to set down something. Also, the shock memoirs of the 1990s, when you have an avalanche of memoirs about dysfunctional families, for some reason, that hasn't gone away. But there's always a market for memoirs of people who aren't so messed up. A lot of people are simply setting things down. So first of all, I want to say what a memoir is. A memoir is a part of life, a chunk of time. And you may decide to do your whole life in these chunks, and then the whole thing would be an autobiography. But a memoir can be anything from a high school student's college application essay to Hemingway's A Movable Feast. And I have thought about, as I take notes on my memoir, writing about when I first went to Paris, and I was so impossibly naive. But the way it started, and this is an important thing to think about with your memoirs, is that you have a decision point when you're embarking on a new phase of your life or something like that, and that's a good point to start the memoir. What happened with me is I was a senior in college, and one of my good friends, Lissy, said that we had to meet in the college coffee shop. She said, "Lynn, this is a summit conference. We've got to talk." So I rushed down there, and she said, "Lynn, do you realize we are seniors? If we don't get married when we graduate, we'll have to face life." It seems so dated now, but that's what she said to me. And I said, you know, I thought about it, and I said, I'm not going to face life, I'm going to Paris. And, and that's what I did. I went off to Paris with $500 and just thinking that I'm going to Paris forever, and it's going to be wonderful, and I'm going to be a writer, and you know, here I was, my sister Joyce used to call me Little Apple Cheeks because I had these red cheeks, you know, and I was virgin. And so there I arrive in Paris, and I get catapulted into this life where I'm going out to nightclubs and seeing people like François Sagan, and I would go to the cafes and see these prominent writers, and I thought, you know, I've got to do something. I look too happy. That's a drawback. Nobody's going to think I could be a writer. And then I thought also, I mean, this was a way to fix it. See, I've always been a sucker for good-looking men. And I figured if I got an ugly boyfriend, you know, like Jean-Paul Sartre, that would do it. So I really looked around. I found one that was perfect. He had green moss on his teeth. And he had a dandruff case that was really something. And he was getting his PhD in philosophy, and I thought, perfect. It lasted about 2 weeks, and then I went back to good-looking men and thought, I'm just going to have to live with my shortcomings. Drinking, a love story, Caroline Knapp. You could open a bookstore just on memoirs on drinking. And, you know, people who have been drunks, I haven't, but I can say, because I've known a lot of them, they are so far ahead of us in terms of what they can write about because they've gone out all night and they've done these things they're so embarrassed about, but they make such great stories. And so the ones that can write usually make some money on their addiction. You can also write about life's challenges: financial, medical, personal, natural disasters, when you started your career, the pitfalls you had in your career. When I was working for CBS, my editor said to me, "Lynn, why don't you take your taxes down to Harold Rothman? He's the poor man's lawyer and he's also a tax man. He does all the cops on the Lower East Side. You could never be audited." I said, "He's my man." And so I went down there, and we had to sit in chairs like you're sitting because he wouldn't take appointments. And the reason he was called the poor man's lawyer is he took anybody off the street, the poor, the tired, anybody, and they all came to Harold. So he had this line, and mixed in with him were all the people who were researchers at Time, the people who worked at CBS and ABC. So you had these hoochie-poochie young women mixed in with these people with these, terrible problems. So I waited and waited and waited until I finally had the seat next to Harold. Just then, a man walked in and said, "I just shot my wife." And I stood up and said, "It's my turn." How do you handle the fear of disapproval? You wrote it, and you have to do it, so it's your take. You have to say, I'm really not out to get anybody. I'm not settling any scores. I'm trying to tell the truth as I saw it. Even when you do it with the best of motives, somebody's going to take exception to what you've written. I wrote a book, I brought a couple of them along, on camping and comfort. And I described a scene where we're all sitting around a campfire in northern Maine, and I think it's wonderful, and John's sitting on a dilapidated chair and the tent's sagging, and there I am saying, and I said, "Where shall we camp next year?" And my son Alexander said, "In a hotel." And I wrote this, and then I said it as he said this as he popped a marshmallow in his mouth. Now, I don't see anything offensive about that. Alexander said it made him sound fat. Now, that's what I mean. You just never know what people are going to find offensive.